When it comes to the superhero genre, audiences can be rather particular about what they want from their big screen showdowns. Whether the trend is gritty superhero dramas, comedy-infused MCU flicks, or dicks out for Harambe meme-a-thons like Deadpool, these different takes on the same genre have produced some of the best movies to ever grace it. But they've also resulted in other, just as good flicks being underappreciated. While you might have already written them off in the past, these amazing superhero movies deserve to be recognized alongside the likes of other fan favorites, or at the very least deserve another viewing so you can tell me how wrong I am. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 underrated superhero movies that deserve a second viewing. Number 10. Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. In a way, it's kind of crazy that there was ever a sequel to the 2007 Ghost Rider film. With a murky, toned down, and rather mundane origin story, the original is the absolute worst kind of superhero movie. That's not something you can say about the film's sequel, Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance, though. With a smaller budget and pushing the PG-13 rating to the max, the new movie was a much riskier affair than its by-the-numbers predecessor. Hell, no longer constrained by studio pressure, Nick Cage not only chews the scenery in every scene he's in, but practically swallows it all whole, giving one of the most outrageous performances of his entire career, and that's saying something. It's not some kind of genre-defining classic, but there's definitely a sense that audiences went into Spirit of Vengeance already expecting it to be bad. But if you've got an open mind for a different kind of superhero movie where the hero pisses fire, then you might get something out of just how insane this Ghost Rider sequel can get. Number 9. Darkman. Before Sam Raimi cut his teeth on big budget superhero movies proper with the original Spider-Man, the director already put his own mark on the genre with Darkman. Sure, it was rough around the edges, but in hindsight it's clear that the picture essentially worked as a practice run for the director's time at the helm of everyone's favourite webhead. That's not to do a disservice to Darkman itself, of course, as the flick is still a thoroughly enjoyable superhero romp in its own right. With Liam Neeson starring as the titular character, an unassuming family man turned brooding vigilante after witnessing the death of his family and being burned alive, Raimi's film walks the line between being a full-on glorious homage to early comic books and a wacky B-movie more in line with the director's previous filmography. Even though the movie didn't set the box office alight at the time, Darkman's reputation has since cemented it as a genuine cult classic. Number 8. Daredevil, the director's cut. While perhaps not quite as dark as the Netflix adaptation, the first big screen outing for Daredevil, well, the director's cut at least, was much more mature than the original edition's infamous park fight scene and Evanescence training sessions would have you believe. Explaining threads that were left hanging in the more well-known version, the added footage in the director's cut makes the film much more coherent, and the originally patchy and erratic second act now flows together like, well, an actual movie should. Not only that, but this version includes more fight scenes and less censored action overall, creating a more intense atmosphere in the process. Of course, violence and gore aren't everything, but when you've got a superhero as dark as Daredevil, Hell's Kitchen needs to at least feel like the threatening place it's supposed to be. Number 7. Super. Before James Gunn was called up to change the superhero world forever with Guardians of the Galaxy, the then unknown director was quite happy and quite busy being the indie king of B-movie schlock. With Super, Gunn was able to tell a weird, surreal story about a disgruntled misfit who takes up real-life superheroing. Played by The Office's Rainn Wilson, the role was actually quite the tour de force for the actor, with Gunn's comedy featuring a surprisingly dark emotional core to what was otherwise a hugely irreverent film featuring peak Kevin Bacon as the villain. While it's a little unpolished, Super is a smart ode to the comic books it takes influence from. With a real mean streak, it's perhaps more cynical about the whole idea of superheroes than it might appear at first glance. But with a script as funny and as heartbreaking as Gunn's, you probably won't even care. Number 6. Batman Forever. After 2 dark, gothic Batman tales under the helm of director Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher was able to take the silliest parts of the Dark Knight's mythology and transform them into a campy, yet still suitably atmospheric, superhero tale. As always, Batman's stories are only as strong as their villains, so Forever's decision to draft in A-listers like Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey to play iconic members of the Dark Knight's rogues gallery was a stroke of genius. Even if they were a bit silly, both actors attack their parts with a great amount of gravitas and charisma, something that can't be said for Arnie and Uma Thurman, who headlined the god-awful follow-up. Yeah, Joel Schumacher is considered the worst director ever thanks to Batman and Robin, and his superhero flicks are essentially treated as the original sin of celluloid. But Batman Forever is like a Saturday morning cartoon brought to life on the big screen in glorious, over-the-top fashion. Number 5. The Wolverine. Before he went on to make the definitive Wolverine movie, and arguably one of the best superhero movies of all time in Logan, James Mangold was already attempting to put a new spin on the character in the Wolverine. Although it's still tied down to the comic book trappings and obvious studio mandates, especially in the final third, this sequel still takes plenty of risks. Mangold seems to love making Logan feel more human, and taking away his healing factor in this serves to make the character far more vulnerable. Not that that gets in the way of him fighting ninjas on top of bullet trains, obviously. There's also an R-rated version that ups the gore quite considerably, and while that does feel like a practice run for Logan, it still awards an added edge to the violence overall. It has an ending teaser that goes nowhere and is sort of completely rendered redundant by Logan, but as a standalone flick, The Wolverine is a remarkable entry in the often hit and miss X-Men universe. Number 4. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Although Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 wasn't given a kicking or anything when it released, it was demonstrably considered a step down from the original movie, which is insane because Volume 2 is better in almost every single way. Sure, it doesn't have that initial novelty, and there are a few moments where the humor doesn't quite land. You can goddamn bet I would have cut that entire Taserface bit out, Jesus H. Christ, but everything else is so spot on. The terrible villain of the first movie is swapped out here in favor of something far more personal with Kurt Russell's ego. In fact, just about every little narrative arc is awarded huge emotional heft, be it Nebula and Gamora facing off or Rocket bonding with Yondu, who gave us the second best Mary Poppins moment of 2017. Consequently, not only is Guardians 2 a spectacular sci-fi romp with ridiculously satisfying set pieces, but it's bolstered by a beating heart that proves just why this band of misfits is so beloved in the first place. Number 3. Blade. Although some would prefer Guillermo del Toro's more comic book inclined sequel over the Stephen Norrington original, the 1998 Blade film is the kind of full-on action movie you just don't see today. A hard R brutal action flick, the original film has more in common with suspenseful horror thrillers of the 90s than it does with actual comic book movies. However, that's part of the charm, as this superhero flick is more concerned with creating insanely imaginative horror scenes and Wesley Snipes kicking knives into vampires' faces than it is dealing with the actual source material. Speaking of, the movie boasts the perfect casting in Snipes as the deadpan vampire hunter, perhaps the only person ever who could successfully sell a line as daft as "Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill." Goddamn is he ball-punchingly awesome in this. Number 2. Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi's follow-up to one of the greatest superhero films ever made obviously isn't as good as its predecessor, because really, not many films are, but its passionate desire to go way out there and break the rules of the genre should be commended as much as any of the other supposed unconventional superhero movies that have hit the market since. Would any other movie in the genre have even a single jazz dance sequence, never mind two? Would any other movie show their main character turning evil not by making them abuse substances or start lashing out, but by making them an emo and having them bumble down the street, strutting around like Adam Cleary after one too many? Of course they wouldn't, but it's so good here. Alright, maybe it's for the best that most movies don't do that, but there's an infectious, weird and risky atmosphere around every creative decision in Spider-Man 3, and it results in a film that genuinely feels like nothing else in the genre. Number 1. Captain America, the First Avenger. Although the Russo brothers directed Winter Soldier and Civil War were the ones to cement the Captain America series as a bona fide winner for Marvel, they would be nothing without the original effort, The First Avenger. Though it was viewed as perhaps the weakest entry in Phase 1 at the time, maybe thanks to its more overtly campy roots, heavy reliance on montages and weird Chris Evans CGI, it's actually one of the strongest. It's surprisingly one of the most action-heavy installments in the early run of movies too, but it's so memorable because it captures the character of Steve Rogers so well. From following #Skinny Steve dealing with bullies, taking the heat from an even more deadpan than usual Tommy Lee Jones, to eventually crashing into the ice after saying goodbye to Peggy Carter, there's a real emotional heft to this World War II movie that rarely ever gets recognized. Alongside Tony Stark, Rogers is the heart and soul of the MCU, and this initial film proves it.
Hey guys, before you go, I just wanted to talk to you about a brand new project that we're going to have starting up pretty soon. It's a brand new channel called That Film Theory, the pace of which is going to be a bit more relaxed and focus on kind of video essays on our favourite cinematic experiences. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, then click the screen and go over there. Hopefully we'll see you soon. We're passionate about it, so come support us.